Hi, everybody. We want to welcome you to the Bureau of Justice Assistance Adult Treatment Court Discretionary Grant Program webinar. My name is Dr. Christina Lanier, and I'm one of the co-directors of the National Drug Court Resource Center. We'd like to welcome you to this webinar. A few housekeeping issues before we get started. Obviously, if you have difficulties hearing, you can click the arrow next to the mute icon to make adjustments. There is a phone number available on the webinar invitation that you can also use to call in. There's a Q&A and a chat. We'll ask that you post all of your questions to the Q&A box, and we'll answer those questions at the end of the webinar. Live captioning is also available by clicking on the live transcript radio button. And a recording, the transcript, and the PowerPoint will be posted on both the BJA and the NDCRC websites. Now I'm going to turn it over to Greg Terrain from BJA.
All right, thanks, Christina. Hello, everyone, and welcome to BJA's Adult Treatment Court Solicitation webinar. I'm Gregory Terrain, the Policy Advisor for BJA. You'll hear from me as well as Nico Taylor, our State Policy Advisor. Next slide. So here's today's agenda. We'll provide an overview of the Office of Justice Program as well as the Bureau of Justice Assistance. We'll go over adult treatment court appropriations. We'll go over some of the priority areas for both OJP and BJA. We'll go over the grant eligibility categories and requirements, review application sections, some tips for you all that'll be applying. We have application resources, then we'll have a Q&A. I do want to add, if you can please definitely put in your questions in Q&A. We are going to have a hard stop at 4 o'clock. So for whatever we don't get to, we'll create a FAQ related to the questions that we both did respond to, as well as the ones that you submitted. Next slide. So we do have some excitement in this webinar. We have some polls that we want you to respond to. At BJA, we're always looking at how we could better serve our grantees and those who are looking to apply. So the first poll question is, do you plan to apply for the solicitation? Indicate yes or no. And we'll take 30 seconds to respond to these polls. And again, your participation in these polls is extremely helpful for us to get good insight on how we can better support you in developing our solicitation as well as our program. Okay. So it looks like we have a large group that's kind of half and half in terms of those indicating that they will apply and those are undecided. So hopefully those are undecided, we can make you feel more comfortable during today's webinar to make you want to be encouraged to apply. Okay, so I think we got responses there. We could probably move on to the next slide. One more poll question up early. What state are you from? So when the example is, the respondent is, you can put in your state initials, capital, examples, capital O or H. If you're in Vermont, it's capital V and T. So you just want to get a sense of who's actually, what states are being represented in today's webinar. We definitely want to make sure that we reach out to all states, support all states, and where we don't have resources at, we want to make sure we kind of prioritize those areas as well. So be helpful to indicate that information. So thank you to all that have responded. I don't know necessarily we can see the results of what states that shown up. I'm quite sure we'll have that information that we can be able to use to share. So thank you all for completing that short poll question. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. So what is the Office of Justice Program? We are one of 3 grant-making components within the Department of Justice, and we provide grant funding, training, research, and statistics to the criminal justice community. On the right side, you'll see OJP and all the different entities that sit within the Office of Justice Programs. You see on top the Bureau of Justice Assistance, where both me and Nico sit, as well as where this program is funded. And then I'll just make a slight focus on OJJAP, second to the organization to the bottom. As many of you might be aware, they support the Juvenile and Family Treatment Court program. So many of you might be aware of that already. Next slide. So our mission at BJA is to provide leadership and services in grant administration and criminal justice policy development to support state, local, and tribal justice strategies. BJA works with community organizations, governments, nonprofits to reduce crime, reduce recidivism, and the unnecessary confinement, and to promote safety and fair criminal justice system. Next slide. So our director, Carlton Moore, was appointed by President Biden in February 2022. He leads BJA's overall team. It's composed of our policy office, our programs office, our operations office, as well as public safety officer benefits office. Our policy office is responsible for national leadership on the criminal justice organizations. We look at particular models to replicate. We use data-driven, evidence-based strategies into our operations models and our practices and programs. The program office administers the grants. They are your point of contact. So if you are able to receive an award, you would be connected to your grant manager in the program office, and they are definitely your direct contact to your award. Operation office coordinates communications, formulates budgets, contracts, cooperative agreements, as well as manage our performance, measuring performance of our grantees. And then you also have the public safety officer benefits office, which provides death and education benefits to survivors of fallen law enforcement officers, firefighters, and public safety officers. Next slide. So we have 5 strategic focus areas. 1 is to improve public safety. 2 is to reduce recidivism. 3, integration of evidence-based research-driven strategies. 4 is to increase program effectiveness through the utilization of analyzing data, looking at our performance measures to ensure that we're constantly looking at the latest trends to increase the success of our programs, and ensuring organizational excellence through outstanding administration and oversight of all BJA strategic investments. Next slide. So we invest in diverse funding streams to accomplish these goals. We do research, develop, and deliver what works. We create tools and products to build capacity and improve outcomes. And we consult, connect, and convene with our partners, whether it be our federal partners, our TTA providers, or our community partners, to ensure that, again, we're constantly looking at what is working, what can we do, how can we work with more partners to be able to ensure that we are creating and developing a successful program, no matter if it's our adult treatment court program or any program that's within Bureau of Justice Assistance. Next slide. I want to give you a sense of our funding over the past 6 years. As you can see, we have been increasing that funding over the past few years. These numbers are within the millions. So we're now at 95 million. Back in 2018, we were at 75 million. So this goes to show that the work that you all are doing, our TTA providers, our partners in the states, local jurisdictions, you guys are making this program work successfully. Congress is hearing it, and as a result, we continue to receive an increase in our funding to better support you in your work and to get those funds out to you to be able to implement and or enhance your treatment court programs. Next slide. So the question is, how do we use that funding? So that 95 million goes into a couple different things that supports our overall work in the treatment court program. So the first being, we make site-based awards. So this year we're looking to project to make 42 awards. So that supports that. We also support our National Training and Technical Assistance Initiative, which we provide free training and technical assistance, not only to our grantees, but also to the drug court field through our TTA providers. It also supports the National Drug Court Resource Center, which is a clearinghouse for all things treatment court. So I'll probably mention it again, but if you haven't visited the National Drug Court Resource Center, please do. There's a lot of resources on there. There's a tab on there also about grant writing. And grant opportunities. So please take the opportunity to visit that website as well. And then Office of Justice, OJJDP, we do transfer funds to OJJDP that supports both their family and juvenile treatment court program. And then we also invest some of these funds into constantly looking at the research, evaluations, and provide really knowledge about what's going on in the field to inform the field what's going on. Again, to back in turn, to look and see how we could continuously to make this a stronger program. Next slide. So I mentioned priority areas. So there's OJB priority areas, and then we focus on BJA priority areas as well. For OJP, if you're familiar with our solicitation last year, these priorities are pretty similar. So we do, if you are applying and you want to apply for a priority consideration, you would need to first address potential racial inequities or demonstrate that you're looking to address potential racial equities and contribute to greater access to services and opportunities for communities that have been historically underserved. Another prior consideration, you must demonstrate that your capabilities and competencies implement their proposed projects are enhanced because they identify as culturally specific organization. And that could be also proposing one proposed subrecipient that will receive at least 40% of the grant award. And then lastly, if you're seeking to provide resources for rural and tribal communities. Next slide. Some of the things that we look at when we're reviewing the applications with our peer reviewers, as well as within our office. Some of the things is a priority if you're serving high-risk, high-need participants through the utilization of a validated risk assessment tool. We know from the research that those are most successful in treatment courts are those that are high-risk, high-need. So we'll be looking at that language or some language in your application that indicates that. We know treatment courts are one of the most evidence-based programs. There's a bunch of research on these programs. So we have developed through our partnership with NADCP is the the drug court best practice standards, as well as the 10 key components. So in your application, we'll also be looking for you to be able to address those as well. What's new in the solicitation? Last year, I believe we encouraged applicants to collect data on retention and access. This year, we're requiring all applicants in order to ensure equity and inclusion that you indicate in a plan in your application to collect retention and access data. Providing access to MAT, also making all forms of FDA approved medications for the treatment of substance use disorder available, support veterans in tribal communities, as well as partner with local law enforcement. Next slide. So the goal of the Adult Treatment Court program is to provide professionals in the criminal justice field with the resources needed for you to be able to provide service for individuals with substance use disorders who are involved in the criminal justice system. So that's important to know, because we do get a lot of questions about can we apply as a mental health court? Specifically for this treatment court program, you have to be providing services, substance use disorder services. Next slide. So I'll go into the grant categories. We have 3 grant categories for the solicitation. The first being planning and implementation. So the planning and implementation is for a court looking to start a new adult treatment court. So if you fall within that category, then you would be looking to apply for category 1. If you are an operational court, you're currently operation, and you're looking just to enhance aspects of your current operational treatment court, then you would be applying under category 2. And if you are a state looking to expand or enhance treatment court services throughout your state, then you would apply under statewide. I do want to make a note for the adult, only for the adult treatment court solicitation, because we do have a veteran treatment court solicitation as well. But if you're looking to apply for the adult treatment court, you may also apply for funds to support a veteran treatment court docket or veteran-related services only within the adult treatment court solicitation. Next slide. So this is just so if you're going to apply, you want to make sure you meet the eligibility requirement. Get a lot of questions about that as well. So when you look on the cover page of the solicitation For category 1 and 2, these are who are eligible to apply. Definitely make sure you review that before you begin writing your application. One thing I will make note is just because you don't fall within the entity that would be able to apply, but if there is a need in your jurisdiction, that you can work in partnership with an entity that meets the eligibility requirement, that you may want to connect with and partner with to be a part of an application. So just to make that aware, just because you don't fall within the eligible entities, if there is a need and you connect with county, state, local government, and partner with them, then they would be the ones eligible. They would be the applicant. You would probably be the subrecipient within that application to support that. So, next slide. For category 3, eligibility is for state agencies to be able to apply. I think that note there is just also mentioning what I mentioned earlier. BJA will consider applicants under which 2 or more entities would carry out the federal award. However, again, only one entity may be the applicant, the other would be the subrecipient. So again, if you could have 3 or 4 entities looking to apply, but only one could be the fiscal agent, would be the one actually applying. All others would be, again, subrecipients within that application. Next slide. Okay, the type of courts that can apply. So you see adult drug courts, DUI, DWI courts, co-occurring, and tribal healing and wellness courts. Like I mentioned earlier, we do support family and juvenile treatment courts through OJJDP, or the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, to support their solicitation, but that's not funded under this solicitation, nor is mental health courts funded under this particular solicitation. Next slide. Okay, so to ensure that you have enough time to apply, because it takes a lot to apply for these awards, you have to set everything up, you have to have partners involved, you want to make sure you have all the documents, you go in and set up your grants.gov, you have all the information that you need in order to apply. So I just want to let you know there's 2 grant deadlines, one for grant.gov as well as one for just grants. What I'll say is this year, we normally at BJA have solicitations open for 60 days. As you can see, if you can quickly calculate the release date as compared to the deadline, it's 99 days. So we're close to 100 days that we're putting the solicitation out. We wanted to do that this year to make sure we, 1, got it out early, and 2, we wanted to make sure that you all have enough time to apply. So again, this is a little different from previous years. This award is actually out 99 days as compared to typically the 60 to 55 days that their solicitations is out. So with that, hopefully we'll get a lot of you to actually respond to the solicitation. Next slide. Another poll. So poll, what type of treatment court services will you be requesting BJA funds to support? Please use the numbers from the next slide. So in responding to this poll, an example would be if you're looking to request funding for, let's look at 3, for case management, indicate 3 in the poll. If you're looking at it to support MAT services, 18. So we just kind of get a good sense of if you plan on applying, what are the resources that you need in your jurisdiction? So if you can take a minute to apply or respond to the survey, if we can get that up.
1 second.
Again, thank you for everyone that is responding to this. I mean, again, like I said, this information is always helpful for us. We definitely enjoy your feedback, and we don't just collect it, we use it.
One second, it's not letting me launch that one for some reason. Hold on.
So really just kind of trying to get a sense of when we do receive applications, what are the trends in terms of what our applicants are applying for? What are your needs?
I'm sorry, Greg, we could do this one at the end. Let me redo it. I don't know why it's not letting me.
Okay, no problem. One of the things I will mention, because we do use this feedback, one of the things that you might have noticed from last year to this year's, if you look at what's in front of you, the slide where it says recovery support services, we increased that from 25 to 40%. So you can now request 40% of your overall budget to support recovery support services. So that, again, that's just looking at the feedback that we're getting, and we are making those adjustments to our solicitations. If not, if we go back to that, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so within the grant category, for category 1, planning and implementation, it's a grant maximum of 900,000. That's an increase from last year. I believe it was 800,000. The period of performance is up to 48 months, and we're looking to make 9 awards within this particular category. One thing I want to clarify, when you look at the grant maximum, that is the maximum, obviously the maximum amount you can actually request funding for. You can, again, apply for $500,000. You may request funding for $100,000. It just depends on what your local jurisdiction or state needs. So if you apply, so again, the maximum, that's just referring to the maximum, as well as the period of performance, that's up to 48 months. So you may not need the grant for 48 months. You may request 24 months. You may request 12 months. You may request $100,000 for 12 months. But we highly encourage you to request the maximum amount of funding for the maximum period of performance. Also within the planning implementation, you look to your right, you can see how you can use those funds. And then the note is that for all planning and implementation grantees, they are required to participate in a BJA sponsored foundational training if you haven't received it within the past 12 months of receiving this award. Next slide. For category 2, the grant maximum is $1 million. Again, I believe last year was $850. And the period still is 48 months. And we're looking to make 30 awards in that grant category. To your right, you'll see how you can use funds for your jurisdiction. And then also note at the bottom, if you are applying for a category 1 or 2, and it is recommended that the eligible entity that's applying on behalf of the adult treatment court attach a fiscal agent MOU. So if a county is applying on behalf of adult treatment court, the MOU is just providing more information about how you plan to partnership with each other in support of the adult treatment court program that's going to be supported by that funding.
Greg, I got it fixed, so we can go back to that.
Okay, all right, cool. Thanks. So going back to that, so again, what are you potentially requesting funding to support? And even if you're not, I know we had a number of undecideds, but what are you would see as your potential needs in your jurisdiction? So if you can select in, I don't know if it'll select more than one, but if it's only one, select the most high priority one that you're looking to request funding for. And as you look at the list, also, we get a lot of questions of how can we use funding? Can we use it for this and that? So by looking at that list, it also helps you to see what you can use funding for as well, too. So I want you to take into account of that. All right, we'll give it about another 10 seconds. Yeah, you guys are doing awesome. Okay. All right, so it looks like we're having some difficulty being able to show the results of this one. So what we'll do after this webinar we'll get you guys the results just so we'll make sure we can share that information with you. We don't want to be asking you questions that can't share that information with you. That wouldn't be cool. All right, so we'll get those results back to you. So we'll move back on to the last slide that we left off. Okay. Yep, for statewide category, the maximum now is 2.5 million. That's increased from last year, which was 2 million, 48 months, and we're looking to make 3 awards. What I will say, as you look at the amount of awards that we plan on making for each category, that's what we anticipate that we will make. But that might be different depending on the applications we receive. So sometimes things change based off what we receive. So although it says 3 applications for statewide, that might increase again, depending on what applications we receive. And how you can use that funding, you can scale up your adult treatment court capacity, launch an adult treatment court program in your state. So if there's treatment courts that you want to support funding, you can do that as well. Expand treatment court services throughout the state. Conduct an audit of practice on your adhering to the standards. Use funding to support a management information system, or you can develop a system to deliver state-based training technical assistance. Through the support of our also training technical assist providers that could support you in doing that as well. The note at the bottom just indicates, I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, that within all 3 grant categories, you can apply to support a veteran treatment docket as well as veteran-related services. Again, if you're looking to just fund a standalone veteran treatment court program, you would need to apply under the veteran treatment court solicitation. And actually the webinar, I have a slide on it, but the webinar is actually tomorrow for that solicitation webinar. Next slide. Okay, so it's important to determine whether you have the capacity to apply for this funding. So if you're looking through the solicitation and you're like, man, but there's some places that we have a lot of gaps in, what I would recommend is to look at who your community partners are. If you're missing certain services, you want to make sure that you're connecting with partners that may have those resources that could be written into your application and be a part of your application as a subrecipient, which will allow you to meet those gaps. But you're building a stronger application because you're demonstrating you have more support in terms of working with community partners. So again, when you're reading through that solicitation and you're trying to respond to all the questions that we have in there, if there's some places where you aren't able to respond to, then that might be where you want to think of possibly having partners at the table that could support where you have those gaps. Next slide. Okay, in terms of planning, there's 2 steps to the planning process. If you look immediate to your right, really that's just the checklist that is in the back of the solicitation. So you definitely want to make sure you review that to cover all the documents that need to be a part of your application. But again, going back to the left, you have step 1 which is the grant.gov process. What you're going to be submitting there is 2 documents, the SF-424 as well as the SF-LLL, which is the disclosure allowing activities document. Once you complete that process, then you'll move on to step 2, which is the Just Grants process, where you see the list of other documents that would be what you would need to submit and complete, along with, at the bottom bullet, additional attachment documents, which I'll mention later on in further slides. So that is the 2-step process. We do have a number, I'll mention a little bit later, a number of webinars on how to apply through grants.gov and how to apply through Just Grants. There's a number of resources, and I'll give you that information a little later on in the webinar. Next slide. So basic minimum requirement, which we call BMR. So when you're submitting your application for this particular solicitation, there are 4 critical elements that have to be in your application. It's the abstract, the narrative, the budget, and the timeline. If any one of these are missing, then that application doesn't make it to peer review. It is put off to the side and doesn't move any further. So please make sure when you're completing the application that you are including all of these critical components. What I will say, based off just in my experience at reviewing the applications, I know a lot of times, and completing the application myself, sometimes you have one person that's completing the application, but they're being reviewed by a number of people in your office and somebody's uploading. Make sure that when you're when you're completing the application, that you go through and review it to make sure there's not any comments in it. We see a lot of those. That doesn't impact the BMR. What does impact BMR is that we see sometimes applicants who submitted, and you see the attachment saying proposal narrative, but it's a blank document. So which is extremely challenging for those who submit it, because I know it's a lot of work going to submitting an application. So make sure, I would say, check it 4, 5, 10 times before you submit. Constantly review to make sure you have one person key to make sure that everything that's being attached is what it is. Because I've seen that a lot where we have missing abstracts. It looks like the document is there, but when you click on it, it's a blank document. So that's one tip I'll give you related to that. Next slide. Okay, in the proposal abstract, I'm not going to go over everything that's on here. One of the things I'll mention, you do bullet 3, you definitely want to indicate the type of treatment court that you're applying for. Bullet 4, indicate the name, location, and address of the court where it's going to be proposed held. If you skip down to where it says note, important, do not include any personal identifying viable information in the abstract, because if it's awarded, it becomes a public document, which will be shared on BJA's website. So you definitely want to make sure that you don't put any, so you can put name of the court and location, but you don't want to put any personal identifiable information in the application, primarily in the abstract. We're looking at, on the right side, bullet 3, I'll kind of target, was whether the court has access to MAT. So we do understand not every court that's going to be applying has access to MAT. So what you would need to indicate in your solicitation, what is then your plan to provide access to MAT? What outreach will you be making? So if you don't, you need to have something in the application, whether it's demonstrating you have a plan or you're working on a plan in your application to provide access to MAT. Let's see. Also, whether the applicant jurisdiction has an active federal treatment court grant. So you need to indicate, if you do have an active award, indicate the award and the grant number of the award. We do a real good job here at BJA working with SAMHSA, deconflicting awards. So if you have 2 awards at the same time doing the exact same thing, we would be able to know. Or if you submitted an application to SAMHSA and then you've received their award, we do communicate with them to look at the application we received to deconflict, to make sure that we're not using federal funds in an inappropriate way, funding one treatment court with 2 federal funds to do the exact same thing. So make sure that you put that information in so that we can better support and monitor what's going on with our funding. Next slide. Here at the first bullet, important. So when you're completing the abstract, so again, as you know, with this solicitation, you can apply to support a veteran treatment docket and veteran-related services. So it's important that you put in the abstract, if you're looking to combine one of the 4 types of torts with a veteran treatment court, that you do indicate how much is going to be supporting a veteran treatment court and how much is going to be supporting adult treatment court. We do receive 2 separate appropriations. Appropriations is support primarily for adult treatment courts, and then we also see appropriations for veteran treatment courts. One thing that I will highlight, if you're requesting that funding, as many of you already know, adult treatment courts has the violent offender prohibition, but under the veteran treatment court program, I think I said it right, under the adult treatment court, we do have the violent offender prohibition, but under the veteran treatment court, there's no violent offender prohibition connected to that funding. So to make you aware of that. But again, definitely separate how much you're looking to request for the 2 different type of courts. And also here's where you'll indicate what priority consideration that you will be applying to. So next slide. Okay, so with your proposal narrative, a couple different things. Make sure you understand the instructions, the page limits. Hint, if you fail to comply with that, that may be out of compliance during peer review. So we do look at it to make sure it doesn't exceed the 20-page limit, 12-point font, as well as it being double spaced. Let me take your eyes down to where it says helpful hint. So you can include tables, charts, and graphs. They must be legible, font no smaller than 12 point. But if you do put charts in your narrative, it's going to count towards your 20-page limit. But you can put charts and graphs into attachments and attach them, and that won't count against your 20-page limit. Next slide. Okay, so here's the sections of the solicitation, and many of you completed this application before. You can see the different various sections of the solicitation. There's a couple things I'll mention here. First being a tip. So when you're looking at the different categories, I would highly recommend that you put most of your attention in the most heavily weighted section. As you're looking at this, you can tell us the project design and implementation. So you want to put most of your energy in where you get the most bang for your buck. One other thing that I would mention, when you're looking at each of the sections of the application and you're looking to start developing that structure of completing the application or developing your application, something that's been helpful is to, when you look at the solicitation and under description of issue. So there's a number of different things that we're requiring or requesting that you respond to. I would cut and paste from the solicitation every single bullet. We don't have it listed as bullets, but every single thing that we're requesting that you respond to, cut and paste, and then respond to each one of them. You do that for the project design. You cut and paste, put what we're asking, and then you respond to it. A couple of things will happen with that. For one, if you have peer reviewers reading it or anybody who's reading it, you want to make sure your application is broken down in a way that it's going to be reviewed. If someone's reviewing it and can't find, you're addressing it somewhere, but if they can't find it because it's somewhere else, not in the order of the application, then you're making it more challenging for that reviewer to review it and find it. So you definitely want to make sure you do that. There was another point I wanted to make, but I'll probably come back to that. So definitely kind of pay attention. That's more of like a helpful hint to make sure that you're addressing all the bullets. Oh, the other thing I want to mention too is as you're going through and addressing all those questions, one of the things that you might be aware of, that you might have a gap in that service. You might not have anything that could be able to put in there. Again, then that's where you'd be looking at who your partners is to be able to say, so we don't currently have the capacity to do this. They're asking this as a within the solicitation. Then we would need to then look back and how do we then support what's being asked in here? Who can we bring to the table to assist with that? So, next slide. Okay, so just kind of breaking them down. So a description of the issue is going to really be what are you defining as, what are some of the challenges in your county or jurisdiction that's applying, and that could be different for each. It's going to be different for each category that you're applying for. For the project design and implementation, we're really looking at how you plan on executing your award. And again, like I mentioned, you'll see these are some of the questions that are part of the solicitation. Again, you want to kind of cut through those, look at it, and then respond to it, go to the next, respond to it, which makes it helpful. The second to the last bullet, here is where you'll be, if you're looking to get priority consideration for 1A, here is where you would be responding to that. Next slide. Capabilities and competencies, that's really looking at who you have that's going to be managing the award. You'll also be including, as in terms of attachment resumes for your staff. You're just demonstrating that your program have the capabilities to manage this grant. And also here, you'll be responding to if you're requesting priority consideration for 1B. And then the plan for collecting the data required for the solicitation performance measures. Here where you'll be describing how you're going to plan to collect and analyze this data, who will be collecting it, again, who will be responsible for that. Next slide. Okay. Also, another required document is the timeline. So this is a web-based form included in the Just Grants. So you'll be wanting to respond to what are the goals, objectives, deliverables that are planned to be met. You're going to summarize some of your major activities to include completion dates and who is going to be responsible for that, and then indicate the number of program participants to be served quarterly. Next slide. Okay. So in terms of developing your budget, one of the key things to know is just understanding what are the caps on expenses and what is allowed and what's not allowable. To find more information about what is allowable and not allowable, if you visit the solicitation online, you would be able to click on the hyperlinks where you would be able to see the DOJ grant financial guide, which gives you information about what's allowable, what's not allowable. Next slide. Okay, so the budget narrative should relate directly to the project design. So here, there should be no expenses in the budget that are not referenced in the proposal narrative. So if you're, so example here, if you're not, so I'll give an example, is if you're, well, I'll use this example. So do not ask for drug testing supplies if you do not have it included in your drug testing component of your project description. So if you say you want to do one thing in the project narrative, it should be reflected in the budget. Personal costs should be related to key personnel for the project. Subrecipients should be categorized as either subawards or procurement contracts, and also be clearly stated in the proposal narrative. The budget should include adequate funding to fully implement the project, but no more than the amount listed in the solicitation as the available funding amount. So within each category, you want to make sure you're stand to what the maximum amount is. So if category 1, 900,000, category 2, 1,000, you don't want to go beyond that. Also, what I'll mention, and I think Nico will mention in the tips, is that when you're completing the 424 in grants.gov, you want to make sure the amount that's indicated there is the same as indicated on the abstract, which is also indicated in your budget. We do see that sometimes we have 3 different budget amounts. So you want to make sure that you're consistent with what you're requesting funding. And again, it can't go over what the limit is. I've also seen that plenty of times too. And okay, the federal request entered in the S should match, which is what I just mentioned earlier. Okay, next slide. Okay, so in terms of your budget, it should be itemized for each grant year. A 25 match is required. The match can be a combination of both cash and in-kind. There's no minimum required amount of cash and match. Do not report overmatch in your budget. However, you may discuss the overmatch in your narrative. Applicants should estimate the cost of travel and accommodations for up to 3 staff for categories 1 and 2, and for 8 for categories 3 for team members to attend up to 2 conferences or trainings each year. Next slide. Okay, again, what I'll say is make sure you triple check your checklist. Again, go to the back of the solicitation, look at the checklist, make sure that you have everything in your document, everything that's need to be completed, submitted in your application. There are additional attachments. If you look to the right towards the middle, this is an actual snapshot of the solicitation. You want to make sure that you check through that to make sure you have everything that's definitely required or recommended. If you have it, you definitely want to make sure you include all that in your application. Next slide. Okay, so these are just the additional attachments which was mentioned in the previous slide. One thing I'll highlight that I mentioned earlier is bullet number 3, fiscal agent memorandum of understanding. Again, applying for category 1 and 2, you want to, it's highly recommended that you have that fiscal agent MOU in your application. you submit that as an attachment. Okay, next slide. Okay, here's some of the requirements I mentioned earlier. In this new solicitation, BJA is requiring applicants to describe a plan to collect and examine access and retention data to identify and eliminate disparities that exist for race, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disabilities, admission protocols, or elsewhere in your adult treatment program. The plan may include the use of the Equity and Inclusion Assessment Tool or the Racial and Ethnic Disparity Program Assessment Tool. So these tools were both made in coordination or in partnership with BJA's TTA providers. In saying that, we do provide this as part of our training technical assistance. This would be supported within your grant, that you would be able to receive this training technical assistance for the if you choose to implement either of these two assessment tools to address this requirement of this solicitation. Next slide. Oh, another poll. So does your treatment court currently collect and examine data to identify and eliminate access to retention in your program? Please indicate yes or no, or unsure. So we're getting a good number that's saying yes, and then also an equally number saying unsure. All right, we'll take another maybe 15 more seconds. Okay, I think we got it. Okay, so it looks like we had 231 out of 310 respond. It looks like 39% said indicated yes, 16% indicated no, and 45% not sure. Again, thank you for responding to that. Let's go to the next slide. So BJA also requires grantees, where possible, to make all forms of FDA-approved medications to treat substance use disorder available to our program participants under the care and prescription of a physician. So the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division published guidance further clarifying protections under the Americans with Disability Act for individuals with opioid use disorder, including potential violations of the ADA by facilities or programs that do not allow individuals to be able to continue taking doctor prescribed MOUDs. So which means if you're applying for funding, it would be a violation of the ADA if the court would deny individual who's been prescribed MOUD to continue to take that medication if it was prescribed by a doctor. There is, if you go into the solicitation online, there is a further guidance in a link on the solicitation. If you'd like to get a chance to review that, you definitely could do that. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, Controlled Substance Act. Award recipients are prohibited from using federal funds to support programs or activities that violate the Controlled Substance Act, regardless of local state practices and laws. Program or activities funded under the BJA Treatment Court Program Award must ensure participants are tested periodically for the use of controlled substance, including medical marijuana. So if you're receiving, you're planning on, or you're receiving BJA funds, and again, that is requiring that participants that are in the program are being tested for controlled substances, and that is prohibited from BJA funds. When we look at programs and activities that are funded, that would relate to anything that's directly, that's what I can say, touching BJA funds. So if it's if one of the things that you're looking to do is fund a case manager, then if the case manager is providing services to a participant in all of the program, then that would, again, that's connected to BJA funds, which is connected to the Controlled Substance Act, meaning that you are prohibited from using those funds. All right, next slide. The violent offender prohibition. Okay, I have to say, I get a lot of questions about this almost weekly. So I'll go through our requirement here, but I will let you all know we are creating a frequently asked questions, a FAQ specifically for the violent offenders prohibition. So I know I'll probably get a number of questions about this, but again, we're creating a document that we hope to have by the end of next week that we'll put out on the website, and hopefully we can get it out to all of you as well. So I know you'd be eager to see that related to the violent offender prohibition. So under this, BJA funds may not be used to serve persons who are violent offenders. This applies only to program or activities that are funded by the BJA grant award, including match funds. A person who is presently charged with an offense as described in 34 USC 10613 A1 would be ineligible to participate. Disqualifying convictions are only those convictions indicated in 34 USC 10613 A1 that occurred after the initiation of proceedings that led to the person's consideration to participate in the drug court program, whereas 34 USC 10613 A2 only speaks to convictions as described therein that occurred prior to the initiation of those proceedings. Next slide. So here's the violent offender prohibition as it is in the statute. I just referred to A1, which is charged with or convicted of an offense that is punishable by a term of imprisonment exceeding 1 year, during the course of which one of the following offenses were occurred, A, B, and C. And then A2, which I also mentioned, has one or more prior convictions for a felony crime of violence involving the use of an attempted use of force against a person with the intent to cause death or serious bodily harm. Next slide. One thing I want to note that you might have seen the solicitation, so not included in the violent offender prohibition is a person whose charges are dropped or reduced to a nonviolent offense or charge or a conviction punishment by less than 1 year incarceration. And then also note grantees may use and are encouraged to use other funds for their treatment court programs and serve these participants using those other funds. So if you have other funds and you're looking to serve violent offenders in your program, you can use other funds to do that, and we encourage you to do that. Also, grantees must be able to track these expenditures to ensure that it's separation of funds. Documentation must be maintained to show to an auditor if necessary. Next slide. So I really highly encourage you to participate in this poll and respond. So has the violent offender prohibition impacted your treatment court's ability to accept new program participants? Hopefully we can get everyone on to respond to this. Okay, it looks like we have a little more than half has responded so far. Okay, we'll give it another 15 seconds. Okay, so it looks like we had pretty much most people respond so far. So it looks like 46% says yes, and 54 indicated no, that it has an impact. So we'll move to the next poll question. And again, it's for those who indicated yes. We just want to get idea in terms of how it has an impact, either minimum, moderately, or significantly. Okay, so I think we got, oh, we still have a few coming in still. Okay, so I think we've got as many responses that we're going to get. So it looks like 41 indicated minimally, moderately at 43%, and then significantly at 16%. Okay. Again, thank you for responding. We'll move on to the next slide. Okay, I'll turn this over to Nico, who will provide you with some extremely helpful tips for when you are applying, and hopefully you will apply to this solicitation. Hey, Nico, I think you're on mute.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Hello, my name is Nico Taylor, a state policy advisor in the BJA programs office. If your application is selected for an award, our team reviews and processes the award, and then I or one of my colleagues will be your assigned grant manager in BJA after an award is made. Sometimes when we process an award, we must apply award conditions that withhold access to funds because information is missing or insufficient. Additionally, OJP must approve or clear your budget before funds will be released. In these slides, I will provide a few tips to avoid common mistakes that may lead to holes or funds that will need to be addressed post-award. One of the most important tips for any grant application is not to wait until the day of the deadline to submit. Technical issues are rare, but they can occur. And if you are rushing to submit, mistakes can happen. The second tip is to make sure your SAM and grants.gov registrations are up to date and that the agency that is eligible and capable to receive and manage the grant is the one applying as the direct recipient. Please note that when you fill out the SF-424 in grants.gov and the applicant information in Just Grants, to ensure you are requesting the federal amount needed for your project. Last year, a few recipients made mistakes in the Just Grants application information and budget form and submitted a request for less than they wanted. Please refer to the Just Grants training resources on the links we will provide. Lastly, on this page, make sure not to include any of the allowable costs in your budget. Please see the list in the solicitation. Next slide, please. The OJP Grant Application Resource Guide, which is linked in the solicitation, has important information on the differences between a sub-award and a procurement contract. You should review this to make sure you properly classify your costs in the budget. If you are intended to use funds to pay a third party to contribute to the award project. The second bullet is important to assist us in clearing your budget. Please identify each cost as either federal or non-federal in the budget. Meeting the 25% match requirement is essential for clearing your budget. The last bullet reiterates that you should make sure to provide the additional attachments that may be required as listed in the solicitation. Next slide, please. Previous recipients of BJA grants may remember that we asked you to attach a disclosure of pending applications to identify any pending federal grant applications that may have the same cost as the one you are submitting to BJA. This is still required, but is now a built-in form in Just Grants. You only need to answer yes if you have a pending application that has the same exact cost as you are requested in the drug court application. If you are proposing to pay an outside evaluator for BJA funds, please make sure to include the reattachment, which is the research and evaluation attachment. Follow the instructions in the application guide to provide the 2 paragraphs requested. Lastly, as the solicitation requires, please include the number of participants you anticipate serving per quarter in the time task plan form that you will fill out in Just Grants. I hope these tips are helpful to you, and I wish you the best in your application. I will now turn it back over to my colleague, Greg, for the conclusion.
All right, thank you, Nico. So we're going to go over some of the resources for grant applicants. If we can go to the next slide. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is the National Drug Court Resource Center. Again, it's all things treatment court. So please go on that website, look through all the different resources, click on, there's 2 things that I think is pretty critical for you to be able to click on. You definitely want to go on under the grant writing as well as grant resources. There's a number of different resources that could be supportive in terms of helping you write this award or application. Also, there is an interactive map that has a list of all operational treatment courts and it breaks down data by county level. So that information might be helpful for your description of issue to be able to pull local data, crime data, substance use data, veteran-related data from that interactive map. So I definitely visit the website, and all the things that are listed in terms of resources underneath the National Drug Court Resource Center is actually on the Resource Center as publications or documents or resources. Definitely, if you're writing, you want to adhere to the best practice standards, which is we have here. You definitely want to go in the National Resource Center and search for that, or you can obviously Google and search for those as well. The 10 key components of adult treatment courts. Keep in mind, there are also 10 key components or key components for tribal healing and wellness courts, key components for DUI courts, as well as veteran treatment courts. Other resources, the 10 essential elements of opioid courts. And then our TTA Collaborative, our partners that facilitate free technical assistant training are listed on the website. So if you're interested to learn more about the services that they provide, please definitely visit that within the National Drug Court Resource Center website. Next slide. Okay, at BJA, you can visit our BJA grant application educational webinar series. So there's a number of different webinars that we have there. There are recordings, transcripts, other things that are being helpful for you in terms of seeing what other awards or solicitations are out there, different trainings. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll show some of those that are you can find listed there. So one of the things I mentioned recently, the funding process for first steps to applying, how to prepare now, and other considerations. So that's going through the process of how you go or navigate through grants.gov, as well as Just Grants and other resources that are out there for you. So you could, so I highly recommend, if you're looking to apply, to visit the BJA funding webinar and click on a recording of this webinar. It happened recently, I guess February 7th, but definitely highly recommend you go on and view those videos. Also, I mentioned we do have the solicitation for the veteran treatment court tomorrow. So definitely go on and register if you're looking to apply for a standalone VTC. And then next week, we have a tribal specific adult treatment court solicitation webinar. So I look forward to that one as well. Next slide. So I'll turn this over to Christina to talk a little bit about this webinar.
Thanks, Greg. So this is a webinar that the National Drug Court Resource Center will be doing in partnership with NADCP. And the purpose of this webinar is to provide you with a little bit deeper overview into the components of a grant proposal, but also to look at some perhaps creative ways, thinking outside the box kind of ways when it comes to your budget, when it comes to preparing your application. So we're going to be doing that on Thursday, March 2nd from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the link will be posted to both websites and sent out through an email within the next couple of days. So we hope you guys will join us, sort of a do's and don'ts sort of webinar to help you prepare your application. Thanks, Greg.
All right, thanks, Christina. All right, so just some other resources when you're completing applications. So here is the grant.gov technical assistance information. Again, when you're submitting in that first step process, the 424 and the SFLL, this is the hotline information and email if you're having challenges with submitting those forms in grant.gov. Next slide. So here is the technical support for Just Grants. So if you're having any technical assistance there, this is where you would contact their service desk. Those are the hours and those are the emails that you can contact for that support. And again, all this information is obviously in your solicitation or in the solicitation, but we wanted to make sure we covered it here and highlighted. Next slide. So the OJP Response Center. So any questions you have related to the solicitation, normally those questions should go to the OJP Response Center, although I did put my name on the solicitation. So I've been receiving questions, but I don't mind that. I just gotta make sure we do, what we do at BJA here is that when we do get questions, it goes through the Response Center. We collect those questions, and it gives us an idea of what's mainly people having questions about. And by knowing that, we look to see how we can better describe what those things are in the next solicitation to make sure we address those questions and make sure that they're clear in the upcoming solicitations. But that's the contact information if you have questions regarding solicitation. Next slide. And again, these are resources that are indicated in the solicitation. You got the Funding Resource Center. You have a link to the Grant Financial Guide, Grant Financial Management online training, as well as the OJP Grant Application Resource Guide. So those are, again, links in the application for when you're applying. You can click on those and make sure that it helps you in supporting you in terms of filling out your application or completing your application, among the other resources that we have. Next slide. Okay, I believe this is the last slide, then we'll get into the Q&A. So if you want to stay contacted with BJA, you can subscribe to OJP through the 468-311. You can contact us or visit us both through Facebook and Twitter. And if you're looking for other funding opportunities, publications, or anything that we do at BJA, you can visit our BJA website. Next slide. And this is just quick references to information I just discussed already. So solicitation content, you would contact that number for to submit grants.gov. Again, the SF424 and the LLL, that's the snapshot of that information as well as Just Grants. Next slide. Okay. So we'll move on to the Q&A. So me and Nico will be available to try to respond to as many questions as we can get to by 4 p.m. And then again, we're going to collect this and develop a FAQ with all the questions that you guys present. And again, I mentioned we're also going to be working on a separate FAQ for the violent offender prohibition as well.
Great. So we do have some that were submitted previous to the webinar, so we'll start there, Greg.
Okay.
And a behavioral health agency that is a joint partnership between local and state governments be the applicant?
So when you look at the solicitation, we have who is eligible, and the eligibility is for government entities that can apply. If the behavioral health agency has an agreement with a government entity, then they would be able to apply if that's considering them to be the eligible entity. But normally it has to be a governmental entity that would be the applicant.
Okay. Is this funding exclusively intended for adult drug courts or are other treatment courts that serve a high percentage of participants with co-occurring substance use disorders, such as mental health courts, also eligible?
So for this solicitation, mental courts aren't a court that's eligible for funding, but co-occurring courts are. So if you were a co-occurring court, you would be able to apply, but this funding doesn't support mental health courts.
We are a rural state that could benefit from an enhancement award. Is it possible to apply and utilize an enhancement grant at multiple locations across the state? One application under 1 million for multiple locations.
So that sounds like if you're requesting 1 million, then you would be looking at statewide award because, well, enhancement, we do have the 1 million is for the enhancement as well. So normally that would be a statewide award that you would be applying for, but you also did mention that you are a rural jurisdiction that has heavy need. So if you were applying for an enhancement, you would demonstrate that because with enhancement, it's an operational adult treatment court, but we do not indicate in the solicitation that you couldn't have a central funded treatment court that support various regions within that rural community. So you would have to have the one applicant being the one treatment court, but that it's supporting that same treatment court is supporting various regions, rural regions in that jurisdiction.
Okay. Are we able to use this grant to enhance an ADC currently being funded by a BJA grant, or do we need to wait until that grant ends in order to use this grant?
So typically, if you already have an active award that's serving a particular target population, then we would normally have you wait to you wait to after that award expires. So if you currently have an active award that ends in 2023, then you would be able to apply for another award that supports the same activities. But I also would say if you do have a current award, if you are applying for a new one, it would have to be for a different project. If that enhancement is very different from what you're currently funding, then you would be able to apply for that enhancement, but you have to be very descriptive in your application, indicating the difference, and the budget shouldn't match the one that your current award. So it should look a lot different from what you're looking to apply for. If that makes sense.
Okay, and you actually answered the next one. They have a grant ending September 30th, 2023. So they would like to know if they can apply for another one.
Yes, you can definitely apply. Definitely apply. If it's expiring, then you could apply. Just a quick note, though, that if you are applying, that you wouldn't be able to do a no-cost extension with the current award that you have. Just a side note.
That's a good point. Okay, our accountability court, specialty court, run through our county court at Law 1 Adult Treatment Court. They would like to apply for a 2023 for this grant to fund a court coordinator and case management software. Would this be eligible under Category 2 enhancement? Yes,
those are allowable use of funds. Those are under this award are allowable use. You can do that. Yes.
Okay. If a program is currently under a BJA grant, CTAS PA number 3, would the program be eligible for this grant opportunity?
Again, that's similar to, I guess, the previous question. So if the CTAS Purpose Area 3 award, and I guess I gotta mention, I gotta remember, CTAS is Coordinated Tribal. So it's our tribal award. So and under CTAS Purpose Area 3, you are able to support a healing and wellness court program. You would be able to apply again. The same rule applies if that award is ending, and or if that award that you're applying is the exact same as the one you currently, then you wouldn't be able to apply if it's the same, but you would be able to apply if the current award is ending and you're looking to move with an adult treatment court to continue to fund the tribal healing and wellness court.
Okay, here's a pretty specific question. If I'm requesting an enhancement grant for my court that is going to include implementing a new court into our court, do I want resumes from all team members from both courts?
Yeah, that is pretty specific.
Resumes for key staff that are already on the teams. Is it okay if I'm not able to get every single team member's resume? So we direct them to.
Yeah, so if you're applying for enhancement and then you're also looking to do a new docket that may have a different target population, you can do that. You can apply under this solicitation. I guess more of the question is, so if you are submitting an enhancement and it's operational, then you would already have the staff in place. So we would want to see resumes for those staff, but we do understand for implementation awards is that those are new courts looking to start adult treatment courts. So we're understanding that those might not currently have a resume because you're still looking to hire, is how I'll respond to that.
Okay. Can funding be used to support an attorney at the Commonwealth Attorney's Office whose sole responsibility is the drug treatment court clients?
So an attorney working on a treatment court program is an allowable use of funds because that would be considered a key staff or a part of the treatment court team. So we do fund attorneys that are part of the treatment court team.
Okay. We are thinking of applying for Category 3 statewide to evaluate officer safety and alumni efforts in our state, amongst other things. Would the in-kind match requirement only be allowed to pay for the evaluation, or could it also be used to pay for the court services we plan to evaluate?
Let's see. So if you're looking to do, so the match would, what you are requesting funding to support, you would be able to use a match to address that. So whatever you're putting in your request, but I do want to get maybe some feedback from Nico on that. Do you have any other insight on that, Nico?
I would agree with you.
Okay. So yeah. So if you are, whatever you're applying for, I mean, you're requesting funding for in your budget, then you would be able, that would be also included. You can include as a match as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So they followed up with, they have several VTCs that would be part of the evaluation. Could they use grant funds to pay for the evaluation of these courts, or would we need to apply for the VTC specific BJ grant?
So again, with the adult treatment court program, you would need to indicate you want to provide veteran treatment court services as part of that. So within that, you would be able to do that. Again, like I mentioned in the abstract, you want to put the amount that you are requesting to support both the adult treatment court part of the evaluation, as well as the evaluation of the veteran treatment court evaluation. So you want to definitely show a breakdown of that funding. But yeah, you would be able to do that under the adult. You wouldn't need to do that under a veteran treatment court solicitation. You could do that under this award.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go to the questions that are online. And I think we talked a little bit about this, but I'll just go ahead and mention it. Where can I find a list of the activities that we can fund with this grant? I think that's in the solicitation.
Yep, it's in. So I know the solicitation, when you look at it, I mean, just because we don't want to make the solicitation a book, we don't put everything you can request funding, but I did in this webinar, we do have, it was one of the poll questions that kind of demonstrate some of the different various ways you can use BJA funding. Also, just remember when we looked at the section chart, description of issue, project design, you know, the budget was at, I think it represents 5% of the overall score. So just keep in mind certain things of when you complete the application.
Okay. Can this grant be used for construction?
No, it can't be used for construction, no.
Okay. Are public universities eligible applicants under category 2, other public or private entities, are partnering and sub-awarding to fund court operations.
No, the eligibility is to governmental entities that can apply.
I think you answered this one. They just asking you, can they apply again if it's a different project?
Yes.
If they already have one. Got that. Can 2 specialized dockets apply for BJA together? We have a recovery court and mental health court in Lorraine County, and we are wondering if we can apply as one entity.
One of the things I mentioned earlier in the webinar, so if you're applying, only one entity can apply or can be the applicant, and then the other entity would be the subrecipient. So we only allow for one fiscal agent to apply to the application. So they can be a part of the application, but it has to be, unless you're looking to, again, if you're looking to apply together, one would have to be a subrecipient or partner in it, and only one entity can be the applicant.
And if one of those is a mental health court, could they receive funds from the adult drug court?
Mental health courts aren't eligible for funding under this current award.
I work for district courts. Can lower courts of jurisdiction qualify for this grant?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Just can lower courts of jurisdiction such as district courts apply for this grant?
There's nothing in the solicitation to indicate that they wouldn't be able to apply.
Okay. Can you provide the average amount of the grant awards for the 42 grant awards that you project for 2023?
I believe it's in the solicitation, the average amount that we're looking to make. I think that's in the solicitation when it's under funding. It's probably in the middle of the solicitation where it indicates the average award that we're making and the total amount that we're looking to fund with the 95 million.
Okay. This next question asks, what validated risk need tools do you recommend?
I would refer to our subject matter experts or our trained technical assistant partners. But yeah, I would definitely go to National Drug Court Resource Center to see what is being used. So that I wouldn't want to necessarily recommend. I definitely want to recommend a validated a tool to use, but it really works best for the jurisdiction applying and kind of reviewing those tools to see what you may want to use. And then talking to some of your partners to see what they're using and how that works for them is how I guess I'll respond to that.
Are the BJA priorities requirements?
The BJA are not requirements, but so the BJA requirements that I indicated in terms of in the section of the presentation under requirements. So one of those were collecting the collection of retention and access data. So that is a requirement of solicitation. Providing access to MAAT is also a requirement. So those parts of the application that I talked about as priorities for BJA are in the sections under requirements. Those are the requirements that you have to address.
This looks like a duly diagnosed population, so it sounds like as long as it's co-occurring,
yeah,
they can apply. Can you explain the difference between state government and state agency?
They're both eligible applicants to apply, so I wouldn't necessarily know in terms of going into what the difference between a state agency and state governmental agency. I know they're both able to apply for funding under both category 1, 2, and 3, but only specifically under category 3 can state agencies and state governments can apply.
Okay. I have a couple more about sort of CODs that will already answered that. Another grant. Recovery support service could include transportation to treatment, correct?
Correct, yes. And we do have so there is a link in the solicitation under recovery support service section, what will take you to what services can be utilized that can be supported under recovery support services. And again, I mentioned we changed from last year from 25% of the overall budget to now 40%. So we did increase that for recovery support services.
Let's see. Medical claim. Does delivering TTA include a statewide conference?
We do fund, if you're looking to support a statewide conference, funding can be used to support a statewide conference.
Not 100% sure. I'll read this one to you. Does statewide mean if the court applied rather than the county?
No, statewide, again, is only for state agencies, state governments to apply. And those are for those entities looking to expand or enhance treatment court services throughout the state.
Okay. If I don't need the whole 2.5 million for statewide, are those applications competitive at that level?
If you don't need to apply for the 2.45 million, like I mentioned earlier in the webinar, the grant amount, maximum amount in the solicitation is the maximum amount. You can request funding for less funding, depending on what category you're requesting funds for. Was there a second part of that question, or? Okay.
Coming up on time. I'm reading as fast as I can. We already defined the violent offender. So they did say current charges, which they are being looked at for the docket, or does the entire past criminal history come into play for that designation?
Yeah, what I'll say is we are working on a FAQ. We'll have that out at the same time we put out the Q&A, hopefully by the end of next week, to be able to address the number of questions I received, as well as the questions you guys submitted related to the violent offender prohibition.
Okay. Trying to find something that hasn't been out.
Because it's so many variations with that. I want to make sure that we address a lot of those questions in that one document. And if we have more questions related to that, we'll continue to update that document.
Okay. Applying as category 3 statewide, is an MOU by key treatment court members required? We have not yet identified which courts we will work with.
So so there's 2 MOUs. There's one for key partners. If you're, so what's the question? I'm just make sure I respond correctly.
I think they're asking, is an MOU by key treatment court team members required if they're doing a statewide? Well,
if you're doing well, you want to mention whoever's on the statewide team, those would be your key partners or your key staff, which will be different if you are a site-based treatment court program or a standalone treatment court program. You would have probably a different team that you would need to have sign that. So whoever's your team that's going to be working with you will want to make sure that they are signed off on that MOU to partner with you as a state.
Can match just be in-kind personnel time, or does it have to be a combo of in-kind and cash?
I think in the webinar we said it could be a. Okay, I couldn't hear you all the way again a little bit. Let's make sure.
Does it have to be? Can it be in-kind, or does it have to be a combination of in-kind and cash?
It could be a combination.
I think they're saying, can it be all in-kind? Can the total match be an in-kind?
I know we covered that in the webinar. I believe it's the total amount can be in-kind.
Yes, I believe so. Also, great. It can be, the total match can be in-kind.
Okay.
We're sitting at 4:02.
Okay. All right. So what we'll do, it sounds like we have quite a few more questions. I think what we're going to do, we're going to, just because I know we're running over time a little bit, we'll collect all these questions and then respond to them, and we'll get them, hopefully we can get them back to you by, because I know you guys are going to start working on these applications, you respond to those questions. And again, if you haven't, what I would say to do this, we'll respond to them in an FAQ, but if you need your response sooner, please go to the OJP Response Center, ask the question there. The question will come to me again, and I'll respond to it, but we have to track those questions so that we can update our FAQs every year and make sure we know what's being asked. And so please do that. Go in and go under OJP Response Center, submit your questions, and hopefully once you do that, I'll be able to respond to them through that within, what's today, Thursday, whenever they come in Friday or early next week. But we definitely gonna try to get out a FAQ on the questions for the day. So with that, we'll close out. Thank you everyone for participating. I think it was a really good turnout in terms of this webinar. I really hope that you decide to apply for this funding. And again, if you have questions, please submit those questions. Again, we want to make sure that our solicitation is clear, concise, and it offers you what you need if you're looking to apply. So we're looking at as many applications that we can receive to come in. And if you do submit it, good luck to you, and we'll hopefully hear from you soon. With that, we can conclude this webinar.